Nope, I'm not. Nope, I'm not seeing the video. Nope. I'm only seeing my photo. Okay. And viewers of the NDC Heartbeat program, we have a special edition on this evening, and we certainly do have a special guest list. We're going to be chatting on the issue of the pension payment, which commenced today. This is rather a historical moment for Grenada and Grenadians, and indeed for all those individuals whom have been waiting for many, many years. Today marked an aspect of history in Grenada. And we want to welcome all those of you who are joining us on the Facebook feed, also on YouTube, and other radio stations. We have, I believe, Vibes FM out of Carriacou, and other stations are picking us up this evening, as we're going to be chatting with my guests, Ms. Laurel Bain, Mr. Duncan, Richard Duncan, that is, a former manager, former banker, and former Minister of Finance, Mr. Nazimberg. Ladies and gentlemen, let me welcome you to the NDC Heartbeat special edition this evening. And let me ask you, therefore, to just give a brief introduction of yourselves. We will start off with Mrs. Laurel Bain. Just give us a brief introduction of yourself, your background, etc. And just to indicate to our listeners, in what capacity are you speaking here this evening? Mrs. Bain, maybe you have missed us. So we will make a start with Mr. Richard Duncan. We'll move over now to Richard Duncan. Richard, are you hearing me?
Very loud and clearly, Terry,
Right.
And good night to the viewing and listening public. I appear on this program as an economist, accountant, and someone who has a keen interest in public policy and public policy analysis, and in particular, this pension disqualification matter is one that has grabbed my attention for many, many years. I have opined on it during the last 6 to 8 months. I've written written 2 articles on the matter, and therefore the day that has arrived today is special for me, based on what I've advanced and articulated in those 2 pieces.
Okay.
So that is the context we have here.
Great, wonderful. Welcome to the special edition of Heartbeat. And we have a former Minister of Finance, Mr. Nazimberg. We want to welcome you also to the program. And you're well known in Grenada, of course, but for those who are listening abroad, Mr. Burke, we invite you to introduce yourself.
Thank you very much, Terry, and pleasant good afternoon or good evening to yourself, the other members of the panel, and all of the viewers and listeners, wherever you are. I'm Nazim Burke. I worked as a Minister of Finance here in Grenada for some time. I'm trained as a lawyer and as an economist, and I have a special interest in public policy. So I'm here just to share my thoughts and my perspectives on some of the developments.
Thank you very much. Thank you for joining the Heartbeat Special Edition this evening. And we'll now go over to Mrs. Laurel Bain. Are you there, Mrs. Bain? Well, it seems as though we have lost Mrs. Bain for a while. Hopefully it's temporary. So we would want to start off with Mr. Richard Duncan, former banker, former public servant, has written, I believe, 1 or 2 books, an economist, and someone who has special interest in what is happening in Grenada. Mr. Duncan, maybe you can share with our listeners this historical moment that has occurred in Grenada. Finally, the payment, at least the commencement of payment of pension to pensioners. What are your thoughts? And how do you think this is going to impact Grenada and its citizens?
Okay, so thanks, Terry. I think that the other 2 economists on the panel are ably qualified to speak on the economic impact. I want to speak more on the sociological and psychological aspect of this moment.
Great.
In other words, we're using the word historic, and I have said in the past that what we are attempting to do is to correct a historical wrong. In other words, this Pension Disqualification Act is a historical wrong. It may have been well-intentioned, but we made errors along the way. And I say me, I mean public administrators and policymakers. And in looking at it, we have to agree that by 1983, when the act was passed, we were only about 9 years as an independent nation. We were 4 years into the revolution. And I do not think that the scholars and the policymakers fully appreciated what the constitutional provisions were in respect of pension. And therefore, when the Disqualification Act was passed and certain further changes had to be made to properly deal with the matter, the ball was dropped along the way. So that's a historical context. But further to that, it is the denial by policymakers and public administrators that we made an error that has led to a prolonged, painful, psychologically debilitating outcome, where you had a generation of retiring public officers who left without their pension. And I'm saying that the correction of this historical wrong could have been done earlier had there been more, what I like to call, intellectual honesty in the approach to this problem. So we know that there were several, what would I say, gerrymandering of different arrangements, about 3 or 4 attempts to get around the fact that this Disqualification Act cannot stand, right? So we did all kinds of stuff. The judge has ruled, and therefore it is going to be placed behind us. So I'm saying that a dark cloud, a dark era has ended. A dark cloud has been lifted, where people know now what the constitutional entitlements are with respect to pension once you're in a pensionable position in the Grenada Public Service. Having said that, obviously, we know all the benefits, the ability to meet your medical needs, to refurbish and repair your home, to retrofit your home. I mean, some of these people are old and aged, and they need a medical care they cannot afford. They are in need of house repair that they cannot afford. Some people's house go uninsured. God help them if a hurricane comes along. So we now have to see, what does the life of a retired individual in Grenada looks like? In other words, whether private sector or public sector, at age 60, 62, whatever and beyond, what does your life look like? And how do we create that kind of life for ourselves? I.e., based on pension from your employer, based on social security or pension from NIS, and based on your own private individual savings and investment approach. So I think that's a conversation we need to start to make sure that going forward, retirees, public and private sector, can have a decent quality of life and a decent standard of living after having contributed so long and for so hard to nation building. So that's my opening comments and context as to what today really and truly means. It's the end of an era and the beginning, by the way, of a new one.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Richard. And I'll now move over to Nazim Burke. And before I do, let me find out whether if Mrs. Bain is still with us. Mrs. Bain, are you there?
I'm there. Have you not seen me?
Great. Okay, so glad to have you back on. All right, Mr. Burke. Well, as has been so well articulated, history in the making. But there are obvious economic benefits for the citizens of Grenada and indeed for our economy. How would you analyze what is taking place today, and how would it impact not just the lives of the people who are receiving these large sums of monies, but how would it impact the economy of Grenada, not just today, but tomorrow also?
You are muted.
Right.
Yeah, I want to start by joining with Richard on his observation that this is really a groundbreaking accomplishment, not just for the government, but for the country as a whole, that we have been able to overcome this prolonged period of uncertainty and self-doubt that has led to so much hardship among a significant section of the population. So I think this is a major development. Yes, the government has to take praise for it, but the entire country should feel proud for what has just happened, because in many respects, political will has triumphed over self-doubt and uncertainty and excuses. It demonstrates that where there is a will, there's a way to solve problems. And I am very happy to see that we have now addressed this issue of pensions head on and found a solution, at least the beginning of a solution to what has been a very serious problem in our country. I want to say also that apart from the fact that it has happened, and apart from the fact that people now have their pensions, which I think has been spoken to already, there is another benefit, which I think we should see as well, and that is that this the entire conversations that have been happening over the last several months, surely over the last 12 months in Grenada, has led to an increased sensitization of the entire Grenadian population about the issue of pensions, not just entitlement to pensions, but the role that pensions can play in the development of a country, the role that pensions can play in the empowerment of its citizens, the role that pensions can play in generating new sources of employment and new sources of income for people, and the role that one has to keep in mind, not just for government, but for the private sector as well, in ensuring that more and more people prepare for their retirement and generate wealth and save for the retirement, so that fewer and fewer people over time become dependent on the government in order to survive. We can talk about some of the implications of different aspects of the economy and how it will impact going forward. But I think this is a very significant development for all of us and all of Grenada.
Wonderful indeed. Thank you so very much. Mrs. Bain, Mrs. Bain,
Yes,
are you there?
I'm there. Good evening.
Great, great, wonderful indeed, wonderful. As well, let me first of all ask you to please introduce yourself, because we lost you a bit earlier on. So for the benefit of our listeners and viewers, would you please just introduce yourself and let our listeners and viewers know who you are?
Thank you. Good evening, good day, depending on location. It's a pleasure to be here this evening. I'm Laurel Bain. I'm a former employee of the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, where I worked for over 25 years, retired as a senior director in the governor's office. Since then, I've been undertaking research following the budget and fiscal policy issues, and I've been writing on fiscal policy issues.
Great, wonderful indeed. As has been alluded to already, history was made in Grenada, and history is in the making. Give us your thoughts as an economist as to how individuals should now go about utilizing this, I would say, unexpected large sums of monies coming into their accounts as pensioners. What advice would you give to these individuals with the funds that they now have at hand, at their disposal?
Thank you again. And I want to say it's historic. And I want to also congratulate the government on paying the pension. And also I'm happy with the persons who are receiving the pension and others who will be indirectly benefiting from the pension. Terry, as an economist, and before I go into how the persons should utilize the funds, I must indicate how the payment of the pension will be beneficial to the individuals and the economy, because it comes at a most appropriate time. At a time when the global economy is at stress and there is need to inject in the local economy to resuscitate economic activity. So it comes as a welcome injection. And also I must mention that there is capacity in the economy to absorb whatever will be done in terms of the funds received by the pensioners. However, the pensioners must utilize the funds wisely. They must utilize the fund wisely, avoiding inefficient saving schemes and investment schemes. So what will they do? Firstly, pensioners tend to, when they receive funds, to invest in home upgrade and construction. And I want to link what they're doing with the economy, particularly the priority areas identified in terms of focus on the economy as we go forward. One, and I'm highlighting two areas: energy efficiency, climate resilience, and developing a creative and digital economy. Therefore, when you are upgrading and constructing homes, what needs to be done is to take into consideration that you have to build with upgrading in mind. You have to retrofit to be energy efficient. It means installing apparatus that will save energy, considering things like solar panels in terms of energy efficiency. We are also confronted with extremes of weather. So in renovating, construction, your house, your surrounded should be climate resilient. In addition now, the home has to be, or your electronic, your internet facility has to be such that it could create you moving into that creative economy, digital economy. So that is one point, Terry. Do you want to go ahead with another point?
Well, if it is a little bit short, so I can get on to the other guests.
Right. Secondly, the creative industry. Now that we pensioners have funds, it means that, previously you may have had to struggle, go to work to supplement your income. Now you should have some time on your hand. What do you do with this time? You have the opportunity to get into areas, into creative areas, the creative industry. You can get into cultural things. And when I say you, I mean you, and to some extent, your family. You can get into cultural things, music, cultural activities, filmmaking, writing, because you have time on your hand. Also, I would say, the pandemic has created an electronic environment, and persons could do things electronically, use their skills and ability they acquired over the year to engage in activities such as maybe lecturing. You can be lecturing at home, lecturing in Trinidad, lecturing in Ghana, tutoring, editing document, assisting your children in web page designs. These are activities that could be encouraged. You don't need to do it yourself, but you can work with the youths, the children in the home, in order to do these things. When we look at our information system, we will know that one of the areas where we could earn foreign exchange is in the areas of professional services, the export of professional service, recreational, cultural services. And if we look at our information in that area is very limited. It means that the activities are generally undertaken in an informal setting, no organized manner. So it is time now that these activities could be organized, entered into the formal setting, and also contribute to the development and transformation of the country.
All right. Well, I'll get back to you on some of those points which you have raised in a moment. Now we'd like to invite Mr. Richard Duncan. Richard, share with us, as a former public servant yourself, why has this not been done much earlier? Share with us your thoughts on this matter.
Well, I think Naz self-doubt, I think he used the word fear. But I think there's another characterization. I think that there is fear. What is that bad-mindedness?
Your volumes are raised a little bit low.
Yeah, so is it any better now?
Yes, getting there.
So Naz was using the word fear by the public administrators and the policymakers. Self-doubt, I think he also used that phrase, but I would add to that bad-mindedness on the part of policymakers and public administrators. My view is that by 2017 or thereabout, I stand corrected, there was no doubt, or there should have been no doubt in anybody's mind, that the Pension Disqualification Act cannot stand. So while some of us had a view that, it couldn't stand from very early, and when you look at the Constitution, you knew that the kind of outcomes you were having if you, for example, dismiss somebody under Section 84(8), regardless as to when they join the service, they are entitled to a pension, right? And gratuity. Regardless as to when they join. If you dismiss them and they go under 84(8), you got a pension and gratuity. Yet still, if you work for 20 years or more and you reach the age or whatever thing, you're 60, you cannot get a pension. That just doesn't make any sense at all. But I think that people were just downright not fear-minded in trying to say, guys, let us be honest and put to rest this thing once and for all. So thank God the judge ruled the way he did. So those are the factors. And I mean, the fear that people had, right, about the quantum and what have you not and so on, you simply have to run the numbers and you would know, right, based on the people who are on the payroll and when they join, when they retire and so on. You could model this thing, right? And therefore, this is what has been done by the young economists and so on, and fiscal analysts in the Ministry of Finance that gave the current government the confidence to move forward. And I even argue that even without that, the fact that you owe a debt means that you have to pay. And the question is, pensioners are not in the business of lending money to the government. So you can't owe pensioners and have it as a debt. Get the money from those who are in the business of lending and settle the pensioners. Now, so having answered that, if you would allow me, I'll just segue into one or two points that Laurel made. So talk about construction, retrofitting, greening your home, making it more efficient, and so on. Now, so remember, a pensioner at age now, I would say 70, 60 and plus, right? You built a home when you were in your 30s, right? Hardly able to maintain it to the level and standard you probably should, right? That is when you were young and strong, right? Now that you are, mobility is a problem, eyesight is a problem, the height of the windows and so is a problem to clean, right? You're probably diabetic and probably you have one leg or whatever. There is money to be spent so people can live out the evening years in comfort and dignity. When you hire an architect to design your retrofitting or your construction or whatever, and you hire a contractor, the contractor hire workers, right? The food vendor would want to supply those workers with breakfast and lunch as they go to these construction sites. They have to get the supplies from the grocery store or from the farmer, right? Then the construction workers themselves, when they get paid, would go to the supermarket to shop. They would buy some clothes. They'd probably go on to their annual medicals. There's a way in which the money multiplies in the economy, right? The hardware houses will sell more, right? Courts will not be getting much credit this time because people are going to buy new stove and more energy efficient refrigerators cash this time around. So it costs them less, right? Eventually, you'll be able to support the small businesses. You were struggling to do your own weed eating and your own house cleaning and so on. Now with your monthly pension, you can pay a helper, a small change and so on. So you generate employment through that. And when we're talking about investment and intergenerational wealth and using the money wisely, the lump sum, to my mind, has to go into educating one or two of your grandchildren at the first degree or master's level. Pump some money into that. That is how generational wealth is created, right? Upskill them, uptrain them so they could carry on the family name and tradition. I think the fact that the pension accumulated over all these years and now a lump sum and so on, to me, that is how you have to use it. And obviously, there will be an increase in the number of schemes and scams to relieve you of that money. I'm saying to people, don't be greedy. You got some money that you're not, quote unquote, expecting, though you entitled it. Don't go putting it into schemes to get more. Be satisfied with what you have, because chances are you're going to lose it. Not chances are, you are going to lose it. So get your financial counselors, get your people who are licensed by the Eastern Caribbean Securities Exchange, right? And have them give you any counsel and advice so as to how to invest your money, whether it's in a financial instrument, whether it is land purchase, and most importantly, as we say, the construction, retrofitting, greening, and repairs, refurbishment of your dwelling house.
Thank you. Very wise statements indeed. Brother Nazim Burke.
Yes, I just want to add a little bit to what was said by my colleagues. The consumption side of things, I think, has been dealt with, the multiplier effect of spending on other people, creating incomes for others who in turn spend and create income. So, I mean, that is something that will generate some employment and generally stimulate economic activity and the buoyancy of the economy and economic growth. The investment side is a side that I think, especially with the lump sum of monies that people will collect now, it's not a large sum, but nonetheless, you don't normally get $20,000 or $30,000 in any one shot, yeah? And I think it raises it creates an important opportunity for those persons, because we have to remember people are living longer today. You finish work at 60, but you may live to 80. And the question is, how am I going to sustain myself over the next 20 years if I live to 80? Yes, you're getting a pension, but based on the earnings that you were making when you were working, it may not be sufficient to carry you with your medication, your food, all of your needs. And therefore, especially for those who are in the earlier years of retirement, if you are able to invest in something, not just the retrofitting and so in the house, but actually there are people who, for example, may not have yet managed to pay off their mortgage. If you're still owing the bank $10,000, rather than paying it by way of smaller sums over the next 10 years, you may decide to pay it off and save some money because, of course, interest payments on mortgages can be quite significant. Yeah, so that is one thing. But also investing in other credible, tried and tested investments. If you can put $15,000 into some investment that will ensure that every month you can get $700 out of it for the rest of your time, it may be worth it. I'm not suggesting that we don't put monies into educating the younger persons and so on and transferring generational wealth. But it is also important to realize that whatever you receive by way of a large sum or a lump sum can also invest to create a greater monthly income for yourself, especially if you were to live for longer years. So we want to encourage not just consumption, but also recognize the value of investment as you go forward. Even though you've retired, the value of having additional streams of income without being careless or reckless about where you put those money. So I want to support that idea entirely.
Well, Brother Burke, speak to the fact that this Prime Minister has had the courage, the boldness, and the confidence to put forward such a matter during the campaign and deliver on it in government. Where does one get this courage and boldness from as a former politician? How do you respond to such?
It comes from a belief. It comes from a commitment. It comes from a determination to do good for the people, for the country. It comes from the absence of selfishness, political selfishness. It comes from the absence of narcissism and egotism, you see? In other words, if you are getting into politics for the sake of being in office and you're remaining in office and remaining prime minister becomes not a means to an end, but as an end in itself, then your preoccupation is selfish and is oriented simply towards your own aspirations, your own needs, and feeding the beast inside of you, as distinct from saying, I have now been made prime minister, not for my own sake, but for the purpose of making people happy, satisfying their needs, addressing their concerns with the best effort we have, and marshalling all of the resources of the country for the national good. And I think that is what distinguishes leaders from egomaniacs, you see? And so if you ask me, where is he finding this courage from? He's finding it from his belief, his commitment to the country as a whole, and his belief that Grenada and Grenadians can do better, and they must be given the opportunity to be the best they can be. It comes from the belief that all of us is stronger than any one of us, and that if we are able to mobilize the true potential of the country, there's no stopping Grenada.
Very, very fundamental statement indeed. The belief system, and that belief system proved itself today when poor pensioners started receiving monies in their accounts. That belief has now been materialized. And congratulations to Prime Minister Dickon Mitchell and his entire team and advisors who have stood the test of time from a campaign to now being in government and delivering on a major, major promise.
Terry,
let me now get over to...
I'm sorry, Terry, if I may just say quickly, what makes this situation so remarkable is that succeeding governments struggled with this for almost 40 years. And here we are, a new government with a young team who, those who should know better were saying, well, these guys are young, they don't know what they're doing, they're inexperienced and so on. And in a matter of 6 months, they were able to solve a problem, less than 6 months. They were able to solve a problem, they were able to solve a problem that had not been solved for almost 40 years. That is what makes the whole thing so remarkable. And I want to join you in commending the Prime Minister and his team for a tremendous job in such a short period of time.
Absolutely so indeed. Mrs. Bain, we now come over to you and to ask of you whether if you would suggest to pensioners that or in fact to suggest to government that they mandate some form of savings, a saving scheme mandated, whereas, for example, maybe 20–25% of what they are entitled to go into a mandatory saving plan or investment plan. What would be your thoughts on such a matter?
Yes, Terry, I cannot definitely say if I will do mandate, because I believe in consultation. But I think some savings must be encouraged, and whether it's mandated based on discussion, I'm in agreement, but I think there must be some plan for savings. But let me just mention in terms of the savings also, because we have incomes now in the hands of pensioners. And as Richard rightly said, it's not only the pensioners that will be having income, there will be spillover to the whole economy. So the economy would benefit. And Nazim also mentioned the investment that is encouraged. So they will have some investment in that fund, but they will also need savings. And savings or some form of savings must be encouraged. But I will not make a definite statement on mandatory. This brings me to another point, Terry. With the payment of the pension and gratuity, and as some persons will pay off their mortgage, what we will have, what we may have and could have, is high liquidity in the financial system. When we have savings, we have liquidity in the financial system. The payment of pensions also give the opportunity for even persons who are not recipient of funds to involve in investment based on the savings that will be deposited in the financial system. So along with the efficiency of savings and encouraging the savings, investment and efficient and credible investment should also be encouraged through the financial system. I also believe in terms of the use of the funds between savings and investment, persons should be given the opportunity, should have the support to understand and to be able to engage in investment activities, simple things like financial statement, bookkeepings. And therefore, I see a role maybe for the Grenada Industrial Corporation, Development Corporation, the Development Bank, in assisting small entrepreneurs to invest efficiently. So to answer to your question, savings, yes. Whether it's mandatory, I would not say at this point in time, but it should be encouraged. And investment also should be encouraged because funds will be deposited in the financial system. I don't know if Richard may want to say something in terms of the match between the savings and the funds available, but this is an important outcome of the pension payment.
Thank you very much. Richard, we come over to you now. And would you say that bankers are happy, or are they concerned that there's too much money in the system, forcing them to reduce interest rates?
No, bankers are definitely not smiling.
I can imagine.
Right, because as Laurel rightly say, what you have is this money moving from the coffers of government into the 500 other pensioners, which now ends up in the banks and the credit union system. Now, with that, and already the system is extremely liquid. The question is, who holds liquidity? So that part of liquidity was previously held by the government, right? Now it is being held by these pensioners in these various financial institutions. So basically, what they would try to do, especially where the savings rate, I think, is at 2% or whatever, right? Maybe the credit unions, same thing, is that they would have to find a way to unlend these monies. And that's the risk to the financial system, where they can get into projects and enterprises in order to lend this money out that can fail or not do well. So that's where the skill now of the manager of these financial institutions come into play. So the pensioners are not in the business of borrowing now because they have liquidity and so on and so forth. They would want to get into some kind of small business. They will use their own money. But then there are other persons now who don't have that savings that could go to the bank, to the credit union and borrow to start businesses and so on, because the economy becomes more buoyant and stuff like that. And if these projects are not properly appraised and the entrepreneurs are not given the support that they need, the projects can fail and create problems for the financial institutions. So it's an interesting development. So I think on the micro level, the credit unions, the banks have to hold GIDC, consulting, counseling sessions and so on for the pensioners. In fact, these things should have been done a long time now. But I guess people were doubting whether or not today would arrive. So now that today has arrived, they will now be scrambling to put on these seminars and so on to help these folks. And then on the other hand, they themselves, as custodians of this additional savings and excess liquidity, need to come up with various strategies and so on in which they are to be utilized and hopefully utilized by reinvesting in the economy. And that's where both Laurel and Na's point comes in terms of the multiplier effect and the buoyancy in the economy going forward. And let me just introduce the concept of consumer confidence. I like to tell people, that if you have $1 today, you will only spend 90 cents out of that dollar if tomorrow you expect to get an next dollar. If you do not expect a next dollar tomorrow, you would pinch and inch that dollar that you have today. So you can see pensioners who now know that they have a regular monthly amount coming in my view, frequenting the restaurants, right, more often, going to entertainment activities to relax, to entertain themselves, doing the medicals and so on a more regular basis. So all these things improve the quality of life for these pensioners, as well as, again, as I said before, help to stimulate further economic activity. So I just wanted to re-underscore that point, is that consumer confidence increases when there is certainty. And the certainty that you now have with these pensioners and the people that are going to employ as maids, helpers, landscapers, or whatever and so on, you would be surprised how that momentum would support the economy well into the future.
Absolutely. Now, in addition to this, you also have the CES grant program on top of this. How do you analyze that one now?
I was thinking about that today, and basically, saying to myself, it's a sort of a double coincidence, right? But basically, the CES as a grant is a one-off. It should be used to reinvigorate and to start new small businesses and so on, which is great. With the added spending power of these pensioners now and the people that are going to employ, it means that these small businesses stand a better chance now at succeeding, because the demand for whatever they're going to do is likely to be stronger had you not paid the pension. So I think that the timing is, in fact, excellent. I don't think you could have asked for better. So again, CES, small business resuscitation, small business startup, there's a pension payment, increased spending power, increased demand by these people. Small businesses stand a better chance of succeeding. And the CES program basically could not have desired better at this point in time.
Great. Well, thank you very much indeed. Brother Nazim Burke.
There are just two quick points.
As a former politician, over the years, over the decades, politicians would kind of wait until they get close to the term of an election in order to do things like what is happening now. Pump money into the economy, etc. So timing politically, or all political thinking, that they would extend this opportunity, hold on to the pension, hold on to the CES, and maybe deliver it maybe in the third or the fourth year of their term in office. As a former politician, how do you respond to this? And within 4 months, putting all this monies into the hands of Grenadians and into the economy, basically.
Well, it sort of speaks to the very point I was making earlier, Terry, which is that, if all you want to do is win elections, that political strategy is the ideal one. You starve the people for 3 of the 5 years or 3.5 of the 5 years, and then just before the election, you throw a banquet. That's exactly what some politicians do. But I think the population has caught on, and now when the politicians think they're using the people are in fact turning around and use the politicians and make fun of them around election time and take what they could get. You see, so it is a failed model, and one that I think is discredited, and more learned citizens and citizens across the Caribbean and across the world are rejecting that kind of politics and expecting more from their leaders. In addition to to all that we've said about the pension before, for example, Terry, we have not mentioned, and I think it's worth mentioning, that in addition to paying the pension, one of the important measures that this government has also taken is to join the service of a number of persons whose pension was in doubt. People who were working in the government in some unestablished way or in some unestablished position, continued working in the service or had a small break and then continued in another department or ministry, and somebody turn around and tell them, well, your service is broken and therefore you can't get a pension. One of the things that this government has done is to join the service of a number of these persons. So in fact, apart from the person who have actually, who are established pensioners and who are established retired persons on the face of it entitled to a pension, you now have another class of persons who for the first time are recognizing that they too will be able to enjoy a pension. So the numbers are actually going to be greater than they appear to be at first blush. So I think this is a very important development. It puts more income in the hands of retired persons and is likely to have a greater stimulative effect than even what we have discussed up to this point. And I think it's something that we must commend the government for as well. As Richard spoke about the CES and what it is doing, one of the thoughts and the way in which the two may reinforce each other at this particular time and that the timing is good, it crossed my mind that, there may be persons who are able to twin with somebody who has gotten that money in the CES. A partner, a family member, they were trying to do a little investment. They couldn't do it because they didn't have enough money. The two people can now come together in a partnership or as a family business and create something that neither would have been able to create either with the grant from CES or with the pension monies that they earn, but together may be able to create a viable business enterprise. So I think the timing is perfect and one will definitely reinforce the other. It does create a very, very exceptional opportunity for people in Grenada, for small businesses, small and medium-sized enterprises in Grenada to stimulate economic activity and really take away the dependence on government handout. We have to change the mentality, and that's why the pension reform agenda is so critical. We want to get to the point where every person, when they work, must at the end of their employment period, when they get to the age of retirement, they must get some form of pension, some form of income security, that they do not have to sit on the side of the road and say, well, I worked all my years and I have nothing to show for it. I think it's really, really quite important.
Absolutely so indeed. But tell me, with respect to pension reform and the whole aspect of non-contributory contributions by workers, do you see this as continuing in the new dispensation?
Well, again, it's a matter of numbers. You may have contributory schemes, you may have non-contributory schemes. One of the things we'll have to face is the stark truth, the stark reality. Yeah, the government cannot give people what it doesn't have. The income base of the country is very limited. It's only 110,000 people. The revenues that the government collects, it really just comes from taxes, import duties, and so on. So there's a limited base in terms of revenues and a limited amount that they can spend. So some adjustments will have to be made to ensure, first of all, that the government does something that is sustainable, that will continue to provide something for everyone, and that the government does so, I think, most importantly, with honesty and sincerity. Do not make false promises that you cannot keep. Do not, it is better to overperform and understate than to underperform and overstate. Yes, give the people realistic options and opportunities. Don't make promises you cannot keep, and be honest and be sincere and respect people's rights. You know, so I'm saying all of this to say it may well require some important, some challenging decisions. It may require raising the pensionable age from 60 to 62. In some countries, it has gone to 65. In some countries, it has gone to 67. It may require asking for contributions, yeah, but it must be done in a way that does not involve the use of a big stick on the people. Let them realize what you're trying to do is for the collective benefit, for the transfer of wealth, for the generation of wealth in the country, for income security for the retired persons, and to make your economy a stronger place. So I want to say it may well involve some kind of contributory scheme. Surely, if that is not the case in the government sector to begin with, it will definitely be the case in the private sector.
Thank you very much indeed, Nazim. Let me go on to Mrs. Bain, Laurel Bain.
Yes.
Okay. Now, what has occurred in Grenada right now? This massive amount of cash in the system. How do you see NIS now, which is an entity that basically has been struggling along? How do you see this helping the NIS situation which they face?
Okay, I will start with the excellent opportunity that this payment, the CES program and the payment of pension has brought about. I will also, and from an economic point of view, go back to the state of the economy, right? We recall in 2020, we had a steep decline in the economy, 14%. Now in 2022, at the end of 2022, we have not recovered. So we have unemployment and poverty. The payment has now provided an opportunity to increase employment, to reduce poverty. So we have more employed. We also have the CES program and the pension reform program. And I have observed that, particularly with the CES program, not the pension reform, sorry, the payment of the pension and gratuity. I have observed that with the CES program, a number of persons are being registered. So what we are having now is a transformation from the informal sector to the formal sector. In the informal sector, registration with NIS is sometimes voluntarily. But in the formal sector, most likely, you will have more records of entrepreneurs. You will have records of employees. And therefore, the NIS stands to benefit from the pension payment and the meshing with it with the CES program, because their registration is supposed to increase during this period. The issue of the NIS will take a more in-depth study, but they stand to benefit from the increase in income, the restoration of the economy that this pension and CES program will bring up to the 2019 level, and the higher employment and income to the NIS. And that is one benefit that could occur.
Absolutely. Richard, let me just ask you, do you think that this was part of the economic planning of the government, realizing the state of which the NIS, is in presently, and the challenges and so forth within the next 10 years or so for the NIS? Was this part of the strategic planning?
I don't think so. While I agree with Laurel that the small and medium-sized businesses, by employing more persons, will add to the viability of the NIS, I don't think it will be significant. I think that the solution to the NIS situation is obviously to have the actuarial recommendations implemented as soon as possible. Having said that, however, the ongoing bringing more people into the net is extremely important. So employment creation in the formal sector is critical. The private sector has to grow and grow quickly. So a broader economic strategy of private sector growth. And here now I'm talking about the larger businesses and so on, because we know the limitation of the small business sector, 1 or 2 persons employed, maybe 10 at most, 12, right? But it's the large employers that, in my view, if you get more of those on board, paying NIS, having workers who pay NIS and the employers themselves make the contribution, and in addition to that, the actuarial recommendations are implemented, that's where the viability of the NIS, to my mind, can be restored.
Mm-hmm. All right. How do you see what is happening today affecting the country's GDP?
Well, it is going to have a significant impact, because $75 million is nothing to sneeze at in terms of consumption in some cases, investment in other cases, because that's what the GDP is, right? Consumption, investment, and of course, exports. So if we have the very same small businesses who can do better, ramp up their facilities, expand their operations, and export going forward, that will definitely help in the GDP growth in Grenada. So it is all positive from that standpoint.
Terry?
Well, thank you very much indeed. We now move on to Brother Nazim Burke, and
I think Laurel wanted to rejoin Terry.
Sorry, Laurel wanted to say something.
Laurel, you were saying something?
Yes, I want to follow up from Richard, because what the impact will be manifested in our GDP. And in my opinion, the expenditure of 75 million towards the end of 2022, the CES program should have significant impact on the GDP for 2023, despite the threat we have from recession in the global economy, because we have to be conscious of that also. But it is an injection. I have not seen any other country in the Eastern Caribbean currency union with such an injection of funds. And therefore, I'm keenly looking to see, in terms of livelihood and impact, how this is impacting on our GDP. Secondly, and as I said before, we are seeing people move from the informal sector to the formal sector. Generally, the people in the informal sector, and in most countries, the informal sector is large, they are not being captured in our GDP. However, as they move into the formal sector, they will be captured, they will be registered and reporting, and hence they also will have an impact on the gross domestic products. That's the value of goods and services we produce. So Terry, that is one area I'm looking at keenly to see. And I think technical persons should undertake such analysis, how it is impacting on our GDP, which is fundamental to improving the quality of life.
Yes, indeed. Absolutely. Okay, so we now go over to Brother Nazim Burke. And Brother Naz, recently, I think it was yesterday, Prime Minister Deacon Mitchell addressed manufacturers in Trinidad. Do you think this is all part of the entire economic planning and strategy moving forward?
Well,
or is this just coincidence in your opinion?
It is difficult to say. I mean, I don't know. I know that, well, what I can discern from the entire situation that is unfolding is that the people of the Caribbean, the policymakers in the Caribbean, the businesses in the Caribbean appear to be very curious about our Prime Minister. Here is a young man, very bright, very capable, very articulate, strong convictions, and they want to know who he is and who is this guy that has emerged from nowhere and taken the reins of power in Grenada and is making the bold pronouncements and doing the bold things that his young government is doing. So a number of these policymakers and political organizations and business organizations are calling on him and inviting him to come and be their guest and to have a chance to hear him and to assess him. So I don't know how much of it is planning as much as circumstance, but either way, the outcome is all good because it gives him the opportunity to share his vision for not just for Grenada, but for the Caribbean as a whole. It gives the public and potential investors into Grenada, potential partners for Grenada, the opportunity to assess him and to do business. So all of this can redound to the benefit of the country. And I think it's very encouraging, very positive to see what we're seeing, you know. I can't say it's a plan. I don't know if it's a plan, but whether it's a plan or not, it really doesn't matter too much. It's all good for Grenada.
Yeah. Absolutely, sir, indeed, because of course, we have a very close economic relationship with Trinidad and Tobago, and certainly some of their manufacturers out there might be certainly knocking on our doors and looking for opportunities to expand or to establish new businesses. So it's
so.
all excellent.
Yes,
all excellent indeed. Well, yes. I think we have spent quite some time here this evening looking at the pension payments and also the CES grant payments that has unfolded, has really affected in a positive way the people of Grenada. And I think we can now come to a close. And therefore, let me start with the lady, Laurel, just for your closing remarks as we bring this program to an end. Laurel, over to you.
Yes, I would say that the payment has great potential for increasing livelihood and the economy through the employment generation and the income being provided to all segments of the society. And we have identified these. What we have, I want to mention though before we close that in one area that the country will benefit is in terms of the economic activities, government will receive some additional revenues. And I want to use this opportunity to also say that we have to ensure that the expenditures are directed into local production. So we don't have a situation of high inputs, but there is great potential for construction, retirees, renovating homes, retrofitting homes, educating children to take advantage of a new economy that has been created by the COVID-19 pandemic. We also would have funds in the banking system, and persons will have to be efficient in their saving decision and their investment decision. There is scope for assisting investors in developing efficient projects. There is a role for the Grenada Industrial Development Corporation, the Development Bank, and others who could assist in terms of assisting persons to be efficient in the use of resources. But there is great potential. Also, the education system should be such that it promotes the use of local resources, the use of healthy local resources, so that the economy as a whole could benefit. And the ultimate objective is sustain growth and use the opportunity to transform the economy from where we are to a broad-based society where income and employment is distributed to most of the population.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Laurel Baines. Thank you so very much. We now move over for the final comments from Mr. Richard Duncan. Richard?
Yeah, thank you, Terry. So my main admonition is that people should invest and use their money wisely. I want to emphasize upskilling, lifting education level of your grandchildren, whether it's vocational, technical, or academic, as the case may be. That's how we get to transfer, and develop intergenerational wealth. I also want to caution people: let the money be enough. Do not take any of it and invest in any get-rich-quick scheme. You are going to lose it. And be fully on the alert for those who will come knocking on your doors with these schemes and scams. I think the final point is that a new day is dawning. I believe that we have to have a spirit of prosperity, a spirit that we can do better, a spirit that break the back of the dependency syndrome. And as we look to the future, whatever pension reform is done, let us start off by asking ourselves, what should the life of a Grenadian look like post-retirement? Cannot be hand-to-mouth, cannot be impoverished, downtrodden, and depressed. Having agreed on that, the question is, let's calibrate a system that allows for dignity, ease, and comfort of living out your evening years after having worked so hard.
Thank you so very much, Richard. Very well said indeed. And now, finally, I will get over to Mr. Nazim Burke and ask for your closing comments, Brother Naz.
I would close, first of all, with words of strong commendation for the government. I believe that what they have done is going to be remembered for a long period of time because of the far-reaching impact it will have on the people's the lives of the people of our country, and the fact that it has taken so long to happen, and also the fact that they've done it in such a short period of time. I think it's an excellent development, groundbreaking accomplishment for which we all should be proud. Secondly, Terry, I just want to join with Richard, and I think with Laurel as well, to say, use the money wisely. Be very careful not to spend it recklessly. You don't know how long you're going to live. The stream of income that many will get will be relatively small. It's there, it's consistent, but it's relatively small based on the salaries that you, on the monies that you earned while you worked. Don't be reckless about it. Thirdly, I want to encourage those who are borrowing monies, who are receiving grants, through the CES program, to also try and invest those monies wisely. Do not see it as an opportunity for consumption, but rather as an opportunity to earn more, to make more, and to make yourself more economically secure. The opportunities are tremendous. I just want to say that I was really struck positively today when I heard that of all the grants that have been given out already, and that is $2.4 million in grants through just about 170 entities, 50% of that, or more than 50% of that, was in agriculture. So it bodes well for food security and for agricultural production. It bodes well for export. And I just want to encourage those who are getting the monies by way of grants to continue to invest those monies so as to make things better for themselves. Terry, this has been a wonderful moment for Grenada. And I just want to say how happy and proud I am to be part of this experience. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you so very much indeed. And this has been a very wonderful evening chatting with yourself, Brother Richard Duncan and Laurel Bain. Let me thank you all so very much for appearing on this special edition of the NDC Heartbeat. And you never know, maybe we may have to do it all over again very soon when another unfolding of another historical transformation, be it financial or otherwise, may probably be presented to the people of Grenada. So thank you all very much. And I want to thank all those who joined us on Facebook, on YouTube, and various radio stations throughout Grenada. I want to thank you all so very much. And join us on Sunday when we do another NDC Heartbeat all over again. Thank you and have a great evening.
Thank you.